You never really know what a single act of kindness can do, until it changes everything. That rainy afternoon in Florida, a teenage boy walked home from work, soaked to the bone, tired and hungry. He had no idea that within minutes his life, and the life of a little boy he'd never met, would never be the same again. Sometimes, destiny doesn't knock on your door. It waits for you in the mud, in the storm, in the moments when your heart decides to act even when no one else will. This isn't just a story about helping a stranger. It's about what happens when love finds you in the unlikeliest place, when two broken families collide and somehow heal each other. So listen closely, because this story might just remind you that kindness still matters, and that sometimes the person you save ends up saving you too. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button, share with friends and comment where you're watching from. Thank you. Let me tell you a story that began on a rainy afternoon in a small Florida town, a place where palm trees sway gently even when the sky grows dark, and where people often smile but don't always see what's right in front of them. It's the kind of town where time moves slow, but pain doesn't wait for anyone. Ethan Cole was just 14, but life had already made him older than his age. He lived in a faded one-bedroom apartment with his grandmother, Rose, a woman whose hands had known both love and struggle. The walls of their little home were covered with old photographs, and the smell of home-cooked meals that had stretched farther than they should. Grandma Rose had raised Ethan since he was 6, ever since his parents' car accident left him without a mother or father. She was gentle, but the years hadn't been kind to her body. Diabetes had taken away her strength, and some days she could barely walk to the front porch. But no matter how tired she was, she'd always tell Ethan, "Baby, hearts are for helping. When you see someone in need, you don't turn away. You reach out." And Ethan believed that deeply. Every morning before school, he'd head out early to stock shelves at the corner grocery store. The manager, Mr. Olson, paid him under the table, $10 a shift, but for Ethan it was enough to buy groceries and keep the lights on. He didn't complain. He never had. Because Grandma Rose needed her medicine, and he would do anything to make sure she got it. But that rainy day changed everything. The clouds rolled in thick and heavy around 3 p.m., turning the blue sky gray and pressing the air down with a smell of rain and earth. Ethan was on his way home from work, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his shoes already damp from puddles. The shortcut through Cypress Park saved him 15 minutes, a quiet path lined with cypress trees, wooden benches, and a small playground. He'd walked it 100 times before. He pulled his hoodie tight and kept walking. But just as he was passing the pond, he heard it, a small voice. Weak, trembling, almost swallowed by the sound of rain. "Help, please." Ethan froze. He turned his head, scanning through the drizzle. And that's when he saw him. A boy, maybe 10 years old, sitting in a wheelchair that was half sunk into the mud. The wheels spun uselessly as the rain poured harder. The boy's face was streaked with tears, his blonde hair plastered to his forehead. "Hey, are you okay?" Ethan called out, rushing toward him. The boy shook his head, crying harder. I can't move. My chair's stuck. My phone fell somewhere. My nurse went to get something and..." His voice cracked. Ethan didn't hesitate. He dropped his backpack in the grass and stepped into the mud. It sucked at his shoes, thick and cold, but he pushed through. "Don't worry, I got you," he said, grabbing the handles of the wheelchair and pulling. But the wheels only sank deeper. "Man, this thing's stuck good," he muttered, breathing hard. The boy sniffled, his small hands gripping the armrests tight. "It won't move. I tried." Ethan wiped his forehead and crouched down. "Hey, what's your name?" "Lucas," the boy said. "All right, Lucas," Ethan replied softly. "I'm Ethan. And we're getting you out of here, okay?" He pushed again, harder this time, but the mud didn't budge. His shoes were ruined. His hoodie was soaked through. But all Ethan could think was, "I can't leave him like this." He looked around. The park was nearly empty. A jogger passed on the trail but avoided their eyes. Someone walking their dog glanced over, then looked away quickly, pretending not to see. Ethan felt a twist in his chest, not anger but disappointment. He remembered Grandma Rose's words. Hearts are for helping. So he did what his heart told him to do. "All right, hold on tight, buddy," Ethan said. He leaned down, scooped Lucas up from the wheelchair, his small, shivering body pressing against Ethan's muddy shirt, and carried him toward the gazebo near the trail. The rain hit his face in cold sheets, but he didn't stop until they were under shelter. He laid Lucas gently on the bench and wrapped his own hoodie around the boy's shoulders. "Better?" he asked. Lucas nodded, his teeth chattering. You ruined your clothes for me." Ethan smiled a little. "Clothes can dry. You can't." The boy let out a small laugh between tears. For a moment, the rain seemed to quiet, just a soft drum above them. "Where's your nurse?" Ethan asked. "She was on her phone," Lucas said, frowning. "Said she'd be right back. But then I dropped my water bottle, tried to pick it up, and the chair just rolled into the mud. She didn't even see me." Ethan sighed. "Well, she's gonna get an earful when she comes back." They both laughed a little, even though it wasn't funny. Then Ethan noticed something. A gold bracelet on Lucas's wrist, engraved with a name, Lucas Daniels. Wait, Daniels? As in Mr. Daniels, the guy who owns the car dealership on Palm Street? Ethan asked. Lucas nodded shyly. "He's my dad." Ethan blinked. Everyone in town knew of Mr. Daniels, the rich man with the fancy cars, big house and perfect smile. He sponsored local events, but few people really knew him. "Wow," Ethan murmured. "You're lucky, huh?" Lucas gave a small shrug. "Dad's busy a lot. He tries. But it's just me most of the time." Ethan looked at him for a long moment. Money didn't mean much when you were lonely. He knew that too well. About 10 minutes later, a black SUV screeched to a stop near the park's edge. A woman jumped out first, Lucas's nurse, running toward them, shouting his name. Right behind her came a tall man in a dark coat, his expression tight with fear. "Lucas!" he yelled, rushing through the rain. "Dad!" Lucas called, waving weakly. Mr. Daniels reached them in seconds, his polished shoes splattering mud as he knelt beside his son. "Oh, thank God," he breathed, pulling Lucas into his arms. "Are you hurt?" Lucas shook his head. "No, Dad. He helped me. He carried me out." Mr. Daniels looked up then, really looked, and saw Ethan standing there, soaked to the bone, clothes filthy, shoes caked in mud, breathing hard. "You carried him?" the man asked. Ethan nodded quietly. "Yeah." The chair was stuck. "I didn't want him to get sick." For a moment Mr. Daniels didn't speak. He just stared, as if trying to understand why someone would go through so much trouble for a stranger. Then he said softly, "Thank you." Ethan gave a shy smile. "You don't have to." "No," Mr. Daniels interrupted. "I do." Most people would have walked by. The rain slowed to a drizzle. The nurse apologized over and over, but Mr. Daniels hardly heard her. He kept looking at Ethan, the boy with mud on his face and kindness in his eyes. "Let me give you a ride home," Mr. Daniels said finally. Ethan hesitated. "Oh, it's okay, sir. I can walk." "Please," Mr. Daniels insisted gently. "It's the least I can do." Ethan nodded, picking up his drenched backpack. He climbed into the back seat beside Lucas, who smiled sleepily, his head leaning on Ethan's shoulder as the SUV rolled down the wet road. When they stopped in front of Ethan's apartment building, a small, faded complex near the edge of town, Mr. Daniels' eyes softened. "You live here?" "Yes, sir," Ethan said quietly. "With my grandma. May I meet her?" Ethan blinked in surprise. Sure." They went up the narrow stairs to apartment 2B. Inside, Grandma Rose sat in her worn recliner, knitting. When she saw the mud-covered boy walk in with two strangers, she almost gasped. "Ethan Cole, what on earth?" "Grandma, this is Mr. Daniels," Ethan said quickly. "And his son, Lucas." I helped him out at the park. Mr. Daniels smiled kindly and extended his hand. Mrs. Rose, your grandson saved my boy's life today. Grandma Rose looked proud and embarrassed all at once. He just did what he was raised to do, she said softly. As they talked, Mr. Daniels noticed the medicine bottles on the table, the unpaid bills tucked under a notepad, the old heater rattling in the corner. He didn't say anything, but something shifted in his eyes, something between guilt and admiration. Before leaving, he turned to Ethan and said, "You did something good today, son. I won't forget it." When the door closed, Grandma Rose turned to Ethan and smiled faintly. "You see, baby, the world might not thank you right away. But kindness, it always finds its way back." Ethan didn't know then, but that small act, carrying a boy through the rain, was about to change everything in ways he couldn't imagine. Because kindness, once set in motion, never stops where it begins. And in that tiny Florida town, under a sky still dripping with rain, two families, one rich, one struggling, were about to become part of the same story. Sometimes the smallest thing you do for someone ends up echoing back in ways you never expect. Ethan didn't think much would come from helping Lucas that day in the rain. He didn't do it to be noticed or rewarded. He did it because Grandma Rose had taught him that real kindness doesn't need an audience, just needs a heart. A few days passed after the storm. Life went back to its normal rhythm, or at least what passed for normal in Ethan's world. He'd get up before dawn, fix oatmeal for Grandma Rose, and head out to the grocery store before school. After his shift, he'd rush to class, always tired but never complaining. That's just who he was. Quiet, steady, and determined. But one Thursday evening, when the air smelled of salt and distant rain again, someone knocked on their door. Ethan opened it, half expecting it to be their landlord asking about rent again. But instead, standing there in a clean gray suit with an envelope in hand, was Mr. Daniels. "Good evening, Ethan," he said with a warm smile. "Is your grandmother home?" Ethan blinked, surprised. Yes, sir. Come in." Mr. Daniels stepped inside, looking around the small apartment with polite curiosity. The place was spotless. Grandma Rose took pride in keeping it that way, but there was no hiding its age. The faded wallpaper, the patched couch cushions, the soft hum of a worn-out fridge. Everything in that home told a story of love stretched thin across years of struggle. Grandma Rose rose slowly from her recliner, smiling through her surprise. "Well, if it isn't the man with the fancy dealership," she said kindly. "You didn't have to come all the way down here." "I wanted to," Mr. Daniels said. "Your grandson reminded me that decency still exists in this world." Ethan shifted awkwardly, scratching his head. "I didn't do anything big." Mr. Daniels chuckled. "You carried my boy through a thunderstorm. I'd call that big." He handed Grandma Rose the envelope. "This is for you both. A small thank you." Ethan frowned, hesitant. "Sir, I didn't help Lucas for money." "I know," Mr. Daniels said gently. "But sometimes gratitude deserves a shape. Please just open it." Inside were several folded papers. Not cash, but a medical voucher for a nearby clinic, fully covering Grandma Rose's treatment for a year. There was also a gift certificate for groceries and supplies, and a letter offering Ethan a part-time job at the dealership after school, not as charity, but as a paid assistant. Tears welled up in Grandma Rose's eyes. "Oh, bless your heart," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to do this." Mr. Daniels smiled softly. "I wanted to. You've raised a fine young man, ma'am. It's rare to meet someone like him." Ethan's chest felt tight. He didn't know what to say. Gratitude and pride tangled inside him, making it hard to breathe. After a few minutes of small talk, Mr. Daniels rose to leave. But before stepping out, he turned to Ethan and said, "Lucas hasn't stopped talking about you. He's been asking when he can see you again. He's homeschooled, and he doesn't have many friends his age. Maybe you could come by this weekend. Just to hang out." Ethan hesitated. "Me? At your house?" Mr. Daniels smiled. Why not? You're the hero of the week. Ethan laughed shyly. I don't know about hero, but, yeah, sure. I can come. That weekend, he took the bus to the Daniels estate, a wide property with a long driveway lined by palm trees, a fountain at the front, and a house so big it could have fit their apartment 10 times over. He felt small walking up those steps, nervous even. His shoes squeaked against the polished floors as the housekeeper led him to the living room. Then he saw Lucas, sitting in his wheelchair, grinning wide, holding a controller. Ethan. You came. Ethan smiled. Hey buddy. Nice place you got here. Lucas laughed. Yeah, it's too big. I get lost sometimes. The two of them spent the afternoon playing video games, laughing until their sides hurt. It was easy between them. No awkwardness, no difference that mattered. Lucas had a quick sense of humor and a sharp mind. He loved talking about cars and space rockets. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan forgot about bills, work, and all the heavy things that usually sat on his shoulders. When Mr. Daniels peeked in later, he found them both shouting over a racing game, cheering and laughing. For a moment, something softened in his expression, like he was seeing a kind of happiness he hadn't seen in his son for years. After dinner, as Mr. Daniels drove Ethan home, he said quietly, You know, Ethan, I've got a lot of employees who show up every day because they have to. But you show up for people because you want to. That's rare. Ethan shrugged, a little embarrassed. I just do what feels right. That's what makes it special, Mr. Daniels said. You remind me of how I used to be before life got complicated. When they reached the apartment, Mr. Daniels handed Ethan a business card. Call me anytime. Not just about work, about anything. From that day forward, things started changing slowly but steadily. Ethan began helping out at the dealership after school. He swept floors, organized files, washed cars. Small things, but Mr. Daniels paid him fairly and treated him with respect. Lucas often came by too. His wheelchair parked beside the service bay while Ethan worked. The mechanics adored the kid, teaching him about engines and wheels. Gave Lucas something new, purpose. And in return, Lucas gave Ethan something too. Laughter, lightness, friendship. They became inseparable. Whenever Ethan came by the house, Lucas would already be waiting by the window, waving. They'd play games, tinker with model cars, and talk about everything from superheroes to science projects. But underneath the laughter, Ethan noticed something, a quiet sadness in Mr. Daniels. Late nights at the dealership, he'd find the man sitting in his office, staring at photos of Lucas and a woman with kind eyes. One evening, Ethan asked gently, That's your wife, right? Mr. Daniels nodded slowly. She passed away when Lucas was 6. Car accident. Ethan's heart dropped. I'm sorry. I lost my parents too. Mr. Daniels looked up at him, really seeing him. Then you understand, he said softly. After that, their bond deepened. Mr. Daniels began inviting Ethan and Grandma Rose to dinner on Sundays. Lucas adored her. He called her Grandma Rose too, and she treated him like her own grandson. Their laughter filled the Daniels' big, empty house in a way that made it feel like home again. But life, as it always does, had a way of testing even the purest hearts. One evening, about 3 months later, Grandma Rose collapsed in the kitchen. Ethan found her lying on the floor, her breathing shallow. Panic flooded him. He called 911, his voice trembling as he gave their address. At the hospital, the doctor's face was kind but grave. Her heart's weak, Ethan. The medication's helping, but she needs a more advanced procedure. It's expensive. Ethan's stomach dropped. How much? The doctor told him the amount, and it might as well have been a mountain. It was more than he'd ever see in his lifetime. He didn't sleep that night. He sat beside Grandma Rose's bed, holding her hand, whispering prayers into the quiet room. She opened her eyes at one point, smiled faintly and said, Don't you worry, baby. God's got his plans. But Ethan couldn't sit still. He couldn't wait for miracles. He had to do something. The next morning he went to the dealership early before anyone arrived. Mr. Daniels was already there, sitting at his desk, staring at paperwork. "Sir," Ethan said, trying to steady his voice, "I need to ask for a loan. I'll work double shifts, whatever it takes. My grandma, she needs surgery." Mr. Daniels looked up slowly. "How much do you need?" Ethan told him the amount. Silence filled the office. Then Mr. Daniels stood, walked around the desk, and put a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You don't owe me anything. I'll cover it." Ethan's eyes widened. "Sir, I can't let you." "Yes, you can," Mr. Daniels said firmly. "You helped my son when no one else did. Let me help the person who raised you." Ethan's throat tightened. "I'll pay you back." Mr. Daniels smiled gently. "Just promise me something, that you'll keep being who you are. That's payment enough." Ethan tried to hold back tears, but they came anyway. It wasn't about the money, it was about being seen. Really seen. Not as a charity case, not as a poor kid, but as someone worthy of care. That night, when he told Grandma Rose what Mr. Daniels had done, she wept softly. "See, baby. Kindness circles back. You throw it into the world, and one day it comes home to you." And it did. Within a month, Grandma Rose's surgery was complete. She came home stronger, smiling again, her steps steady. The day she returned, Mr. Daniels and Lucas showed up at the door with balloons and a homemade "Welcome Home" banner. They filled the tiny apartment with laughter, cake crumbs, and warmth. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt something he hadn't dared to feel before: hope. But as every good story goes, right when things seem steady, the ground starts to shift again. Life wasn't done testing him. Not yet. Because soon, Ethan would find out that not all storms come with rain. Some come quietly, through whispers, jealousy, and the kind of pain that tests what you're truly made of. And it would begin with a simple misunderstanding that threatened to undo everything he'd built. You know, sometimes the hardest storms we face aren't the ones that drench us in rain. They're the quiet ones, the kind that sneak into our lives through doubt, pride, and the fragile space between hearts that care too much to speak honestly. For Ethan, life had begun to feel lighter since Grandma Rose's recovery. He'd started smiling more, even laughing at things he used to brush off. Every weekend, he split his time between schoolwork, shifts at the dealership, and hanging out with Lucas. The two had become like brothers, laughing, arguing, teasing, and supporting each other through everything. But good times, as life teaches us, are often the calm before something heavier. It started with whispers at school. Ethan had transferred to a better school, thanks to Mr. Daniels' recommendation and sponsorship. It was a big change. New teachers, new faces, kids who wore designer clothes and drove to school in shiny cars. For a boy who had grown up stretching every dollar, it was like stepping into another world. First, most students ignored him. But once they found out he worked for Mr. Daniels, and was often seen arriving at the dealership in his car, the rumors began. "He's just some charity kid," someone sneered in the hallway. "He probably begged for that job. I heard Mr. Daniels is feeling sorry for him because he saved his son." Ethan tried to ignore them. He'd been through worse. But every word was like a splinter under his skin. What hurt most wasn't the teasing. It was that they were twisting something good into something shameful. One afternoon, while walking out of class, Ethan overheard a group of students near the lockers. "Guess who Mr. Daniels is mentoring now?" One boy laughed. "That kid from the poor side of town. I bet he's using the old man to get money." Ethan froze. He turned sharply and said, "Say that again." The boy smirked. "What? You think it's not true? You're just his charity project." Ethan clenched his fists, his heart pounding. He wanted to shout, to fight, to make them understand that kindness isn't a project, it's a choice. But before he could say anything, the teacher called his name from across the hall. The moment passed. He walked away, his jaw tight and his chest burning. That night, Ethan lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about the words that had been thrown at him. He hated how small they made him feel. He hated that even doing something good could be turned ugly. And somewhere deep down he started to pull back just a little. He stopped visiting the Daniels home as often. He made excuses when Lucas called. He said he was busy with homework or work or chores. Lucas noticed. Course he did. One day after school, Lucas showed up at the dealership unannounced. His wheelchair rolling through the glass doors with its familiar squeak. He found Ethan by the service bay, cleaning tools. "Hey," Lucas said, his voice bright but uncertain. "You've been MIA lately." Ethan smiled weakly. "Yeah, been swamped. Homework, shifts, you know how it is." Lucas looked at him for a long second. "You're lying." Ethan sighed. "What makes you think that?" "Because you've never missed a Saturday," Lucas said softly. "And because you sound like someone who's trying not to say what's really wrong." Ethan put down the wrench and leaned against the counter. He didn't want to look at him, but he couldn't lie either. "It's nothing, Lucas. Just people talking stuff at school. About me, about your dad, about everything." Lucas frowned. "Talking. Like what?" Ethan hesitated, then finally said, "They think your dad only helps me because he feels sorry for me. They say I'm using him. That I don't belong in that world." For a moment, there was only the sound of the air compressor humming in the background. Then Lucas said quietly, "And you believe them?" Ethan looked up, startled. "No, course not. I just..." "Then why are you acting like you do?" Lucas's voice shook a little. "You're my friend, Ethan. Your family. Who cares what some dumb kids say?" "I care." Ethan snapped, his voice sharper than he meant it to be. "Because they don't just talk about me, Lucas. They talk about your dad too. They make it sound like I'm taking advantage of you guys." Lucas's face fell. "Ethan, you'd never." "I know that," Ethan said quickly, rubbing his face. "But the more I show up, the more it feeds their stories." "So you're gonna stop showing up?" Lucas asked quietly. "You're gonna let them decide what we mean to each other?" Ethan's chest ached. He didn't know how to answer. He just stood there, caught between pride and pain. Before he could speak, a voice came from behind. Mr. Daniels had entered the garage, his expression unreadable. "What's going on?" he asked. Ethan straightened up quickly. "Nothing, sir. We were just talking." But Lucas wasn't one to hide. "Dad, kids at Ethan's school are saying bad things. About him and you and me. They're calling him names." Mr. Daniels' jaw tightened. He turned to Ethan. "Is that true?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "It's fine, sir. It's just talk." Mr. Daniels took a deep breath. "Ethan, come with me." They walked into his office. Mr. Daniels closed the door behind them. "Sit down," he said. Ethan obeyed, feeling like a weight was pressing on his chest. "I'm not mad," Mr. Daniels began. "But I need to know, are those rumors bothering you because of what they say about me, or because of what they say about you?" Ethan looked down. "Both." Mr. Daniels leaned forward. "You've got a good heart, son. But you can't let small minds make you question it. Let them talk. They don't know who you are." "It's not that easy," Ethan said quietly. "People look at me and see a kid who doesn't belong. They think I'm using you." Mr. Daniels smiled sadly. "Then let me tell you something. When I lost my wife, I stopped believing people could do good without wanting something in return. Then you showed up. You didn't ask for money. You didn't ask for favors. You just carried my boy through the rain. You don't owe anyone an explanation for that. Least of all me." Ethan's eyes stung. "Thank you, sir. I don't want to make things harder for you and Lucas." "You make things better," Mr. Daniels said simply. "Don't forget that." But words, no matter how kind, can't always silence the noise outside. The rumors didn't stop. If anything, they grew. And as weeks passed, Ethan's absence at the Daniels house became more noticeable. Lucas grew quieter. Mr. Daniels noticed but didn't push. Everyone was waiting for someone else to take the first step back. Then came the breaking point. It happened one afternoon at the dealership. Ethan was cleaning up in the garage when he heard raised voices from the front office. He recognized one of them, Mr. Jenkins, a local contractor and a longtime business rival of Mr. Daniels. He'd come to buy a car but was now arguing loudly. "I heard you're hiring kids off the street now," Jenkins said mockingly. "Real noble of you, Daniels. Trying to look like a hero again." Mr. Daniels kept his tone calm. "Ethan's a good worker." Jenkins laughed. "Oh, sure he is. I bet that poor boy's milking you dry. You always had a soft spot for sob stories." Something in Ethan snapped. He dropped the rags, stormed into the office and said, "You don't know anything about me, sir. So don't talk like you do." Jenkins turned amused. "Look at that. The charity case speaks." "Ethan," Mr. Daniels warned softly. "It's not worth it." But Ethan couldn't stop. "I'm not a charity case. I work hard. I earn every cent." Jenkins smirked. "Keep telling yourself that, kid." Ethan's hands trembled. His voice cracked when he said, "You're just mad because someone like me has more decency than you ever will." Mr. Daniels stood up, his voice firm. "That's enough, both of you." Jenkins laughed again, shook his head and walked out, muttering something under his breath about soft-hearted fools. Ethan turned to apologize, but Mr. Daniels' expression wasn't angry. It was tired. "Ethan," he said quietly, "I know your heart was in the right place. But sometimes, doing the right thing the wrong way still causes damage." Ethan's chest tightened. "I didn't mean to make trouble." "I know. But people like Jenkins, they'll twist this. I can handle it, but you've got to learn when to fight and when to walk away." Ethan nodded, guilt heavy in his gut. "Yes, sir." But later that night, alone in his small room, Ethan replayed the argument over and over. Every word stung. He hated how the world could make goodness look suspicious, how it could make kindness look like weakness. Days passed. He didn't go back to the dealership. He told Mr. Daniels he needed space. He barely answered Lucas's texts, until one evening there was another knock at the door. It was Lucas, soaking wet from rain again, his father's car idling outside. "Why'd you stop coming?" Lucas demanded through tears. "Did I do something wrong?" Ethan shook his head, voice breaking. "No, buddy. It's not you. It's just, everything's gotten so messy. People keep talking. I don't want to drag you into it." Lucas wiped his eyes. "You can't let them win, Ethan. You told me that when I was scared to go back to therapy. You said we can't control what people think, only what we do." Ethan swallowed hard. "You remember that." "Every word," Lucas said fiercely. "And I'm not letting you quit on us." At that moment, something inside Ethan cracked, not from pain, but from the realization that love and loyalty sometimes come from places you least expect. He knelt beside Lucas, gripping the handles of his wheelchair. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was just scared." "Then stop being scared," Lucas said, tears shining on his cheeks. "Because you're my brother. And brothers don't walk away." Mr. Daniels stepped out of the car then, umbrella in hand, watching them quietly. When Ethan looked up, their eyes met, and without words they both understood. The storm had come, yes. But sometimes storms don't mean the end. Sometimes they wash away what's false, leaving only what's real. And standing there in the Florida rain, Ethan realized something that Grandma Rose had always known, that love and family aren't things you earn by being perfect. They're gifts you give and receive, even when the world doesn't understand. But this story wasn't over yet. Because sometimes, right after the darkest storm, the truest light begins to shine. And the biggest test of love was still ahead. You know, it's strange how life has a way of softening us right after it's broken us. Sometimes the moments that hurt the most are the ones that remind us we're still alive, still capable of feeling, of forgiving, of trying again. After that rainy night when Lucas came to see Ethan, something changed between them, quietly, almost gently. The silence that had grown heavy between their hearts began to ease. It wasn't gone completely, but there was light peeking through the cracks. The next morning, Ethan showed up at the dealership again. His hair was still wet from his hurried shower, and his hands were shaking slightly when he pushed open the office door. Mr. Daniels looked up from his desk, surprised but calm. "Morning, son," he said simply. "Didn't expect to see you today." Ethan swallowed hard. "I wanted to apologize for what happened with Mr. Jenkins, and for walking away." Mr. Daniels leaned back, studying him. "You don't have to apologize for standing up for yourself." "I do," Ethan said, voice steady but emotional. "Because I didn't just stand up for myself. I let my anger do the talking. I made things harder for you. I wanted to be someone you could be proud of." Mr. Daniels was silent for a moment, then he said softly, "Ethan, you already are." Those words hit deeper than Ethan expected. His throat tightened. For a long time, no one had said something like that to him. Not without pity, not without hidden meaning. Just simple truth. "Now," Mr. Daniels continued, "we can't control what folks like Jenkins say. But we can control how we respond. If you want to prove them wrong, you don't do it with arguments. You do it by living well. With grace. With consistency." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. I understand." And that day he went back to work. Not just at the dealership, but on himself. He fixed cars, swept floors, organized tools, and smiled when customers came in. He didn't complain about long hours or low pay. Every task, no matter how small, became a way to rebuild the quiet confidence that life had tried to steal from him. Lucas started visiting again too, sometimes rolling into the garage just to sit and talk. They'd joke, share fries from a paper bag, and listen to music from an old radio Ethan kept near the tool bench. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs, a kind of peace born from all they had endured. And Grandma Rose. Oh, she noticed the difference right away. One Sunday evening, as Ethan helped her slice peaches for cobbler, she said with that soft Florida drawl of hers, "You look lighter, baby." Ethan chuckled. "Lighter?" "Yeah," she smiled. "Like you finally remembered how to breathe again." He paused, setting down the knife. "Maybe I did." Grandma Rose wiped her hands on her apron and said, "You can't carry the world's noise inside your heart forever. Sometimes you just gotta let it pass, like wind through an open window. You can't close yourself up just because of a few bad voices." Ethan smiled faintly. "I think I'm learning that." "You better be," she said, playfully tapping his arm. "Because you got people who love you now. Real love. Don't go running away from that." And for once, Ethan didn't argue. Weeks rolled by, and life slowly began to find its rhythm again. The sun over Clearwater seemed a little brighter, the ocean breeze a little softer. The days felt normal, beautifully normal, until one phone call changed everything again. It was a Thursday evening. Ethan had just finished his shift and was locking up when his phone buzzed. It was Lucas. "Hey man," Ethan answered, smiling. "You good?" But Lucas's voice sounded strange. Tight, trembling. "Ethan, Dad's been taken to the hospital." Ethan froze. What happened?" "I don't know. He collapsed during a meeting. They think it's his heart." "I'm scared, Ethan. I'm really scared." "I'm on my way," Ethan said, grabbing his keys without a second thought. He drove through the streets like his heart was chasing the wind. Every red light felt like an enemy, every second a weight pressing on his chest. When he reached Clearwater Medical Center, the night air was heavy with humidity and fear. He found Lucas in the waiting room, pale and shaking, his wheelchair parked near the window. Without saying a word, Ethan knelt beside him and held his hand. Lucas's eyes were red from crying. "They're running tests," Lucas whispered. "He just collapsed out of nowhere." Ethan's mind flashed back to every laugh, every kind word, every time Mr. Daniels had looked at him like he was worth something. The thought of losing that. It felt unbearable. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. The ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than the world itself. Finally, a doctor stepped out. "Family of Richard Daniels." Lucas's head snapped up. That's us. The doctor smiled gently. He's stable now. It was a mild heart attack, but he's going to need rest and a few lifestyle changes. He's very lucky. Lucas burst into tears of relief, and Ethan's shoulders slumped with exhaustion. They followed the doctor into the room. Mr. Daniels was lying there, pale but awake, his eyes softening when he saw them. "Hey boys," he said weakly, voice thin but warm. "Guess I gave you a scare, huh?" Lucas sniffed. "Don't joke like that." Mr. Daniels smiled faintly. All right. No more scares." Ethan stood at the foot of the bed, unable to speak. There were too many emotions fighting for space. Gratitude, fear, guilt, love. Finally he managed. "You're gonna be okay, sir." Mr. Daniels nodded. "Thanks to quick friends and stubborn sons." Lucas laughed through his tears. "You're not allowed to scare us again, okay?" "I'll do my best," Mr. Daniels whispered. Over the next few days, Ethan stayed by their side. He ran errands, brought meals, and even helped the nurses adjust the hospital bed when Lucas couldn't reach. He didn't do it because anyone asked. He did it because his heart told him to. And every night when he'd drive back to Grandma Rose's house, he'd look up at the stars and whisper, "Thank you. Not just for survival, but for second chances." One evening when Mr. Daniels was finally home and resting, Ethan dropped by to check in. The house felt different, quieter, softer. The walls, once filled with laughter, now hummed with something sacred. Mr. Daniels was sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunset. Ethan joined him, sitting on the steps below. For a while they just sat there, listening to the crickets, the distant sound of cars, the slow rhythm of life returning. Then Mr. Daniels spoke. "You know, when I was your age, I thought strength meant never needing anyone. But it took me 50 years and a heart attack to learn that real strength is the opposite." Ethan looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean letting people in," Mr. Daniels said. "Trusting them enough to carry some of your burdens. I spent too long trying to do everything alone. My wife used to tell me that love isn't just giving, it's allowing yourself to receive. Took me years to understand what she meant." Ethan's eyes softened. "I think I get it now." Mr. Daniels nodded slowly. "Good. Because whether you like it or not, you're part of this family now. And I don't mean just as an employee or a friend. You're one of us, Ethan." The young man's throat tightened. He blinked fast, trying not to cry. "Thank you, sir. For everything." "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Mr. Daniels interrupted gently. "Because that's what love does. It chooses you, even when you don't think you deserve it." Ethan looked away, the sunset painting his face gold. For the first time in a long while, he felt peace settle inside him, the kind that doesn't shout or demand, but whispers softly that everything somehow is going to be okay. As days turned into weeks, things continued to heal, not just for Mr. Daniels but for all of them. Lucas went back to therapy, stronger and more determined than ever. He and Ethan started a small online channel where they shared stories about resilience, kindness, and hope. They didn't expect it to grow, but somehow people started watching, drawn to the sincerity in their words and the friendship that glowed between them. Ethan never sought recognition. All he wanted was to give back the same light he had been given. Sometimes he'd record voiceovers late into the night, telling stories about ordinary people who did extraordinary things just by showing love. Grandma Rose would listen from the kitchen and say, "You got your mama's voice, baby, soft but strong." Ethan would smile and say, "Maybe that's enough." But deep inside, he knew it was more than enough. It was purpose. One Sunday morning, as the Florida sun painted the sky in pink and gold, the three of them, Mr. Daniels, Lucas, and Ethan, sat together on the porch of the Daniels home. Grandma Rose had joined them too, holding a tray of lemonade and biscuits. There was laughter, gentle teasing, and that familiar warmth that comes when people who have suffered together finally find peace. "You know," Grandma Rose said, sipping her drink, "the good Lord sure has a funny way of bringing people together." Mr. Daniels chuckled. "That he does, ma'am." Ethan leaned back, feeling the breeze brush his skin. I used to think pain meant something was wrong with me, he said quietly. But now I think pain's just proof that we're alive. That we still care. Lucas smiled. And caring means we're not done yet. They all laughed softly, the sound blending with the rustle of palm trees and the song of the ocean nearby. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the past, not the rumors, not the scars they carried. What mattered was now. What mattered was love, in its simplest, truest form. But life, as it often does, still had one more test waiting. Because sometimes the greatest proof of love doesn't come in easy moments. It comes when we have to let go. And Ethan was about to learn that truth in a way that would change everything once again. Sometimes the hardest goodbyes aren't the ones that tear us apart suddenly. They're the quiet ones, the ones that happen slowly, with life pulling us in different directions while love tries to hold us together. That's what Ethan would learn in the months that followed. For a while, everything seemed beautifully steady. The dealership was running smoothly again. Lucas was back in school part-time, and Mr. Daniels was recovering well. Even Grandma Rose's health had improved. Her laughter echoed through the house again, soft and full of grace. Ethan had started taking night classes too, hoping to study automotive engineering. He said it was so he could learn how to fix cars properly, but everyone knew it was more than that. It was his way of building a future, of proving to himself that he was capable of standing tall. The days passed gently. Work, study, dinners with the Daniels, late-night talks with Grandma Rose. He'd drive along the coast sometimes, watching the waves hit the shore, thinking about how far he'd come. From a scared boy running from his past to a young man learning how to belong. But life, as kind as it had become, wasn't done teaching him lessons. It started with small things, moments so ordinary they almost slipped by unnoticed. Mr. Daniels began missing appointments. He'd forget his glasses, misplace papers, and laugh it off. But sometimes, his hands would tremble slightly when he tried to hold a cup. Ethan noticed first. One evening after dinner, Mr. Daniels reached for his drink and accidentally knocked it over. He laughed, embarrassed. Guess these old hands are still clumsy. Ethan smiled, though his heart felt uneasy. You've been working too hard again. Mr. Daniels shrugged. Maybe. Later that week, while cleaning the garage, Ethan found the older man sitting quietly in the office, staring at a framed photo of his late wife. His eyes were distant. You okay, sir? Ethan asked gently. Mr. Daniels smiled faintly. Yeah. Just thinking about how fast time goes. Ethan hesitated. Do you miss her a lot? Every day, he said softly. But I see pieces of her in moments like this. In kindness. In how people show up for one another. That's how love survives, Ethan. Through the people we choose to keep loving. Ethan didn't know why, but those words stayed with him. Then one morning it happened again. Mr. Daniels didn't show up at the dealership. Ethan called, no answer. He drove over immediately, heart pounding. The house was quiet. Lucas was asleep, having pulled an all-nighter for a class project. Ethan found Mr. Daniels sitting on the porch, breathing heavily, sweat on his forehead. Sir. Ethan ran up. What's wrong? Mr. Daniels tried to smile, but his words came out slurred. Just dizzy again. Without wasting a second, Ethan helped him into the car and rushed him to the hospital. The doctors said it was another mild attack, not as bad as before, but a clear warning that his heart was growing weaker. That night, as the machines beeped softly in the dim hospital room, Ethan sat by his bedside. He watched the man who had become like a father to him struggle to stay awake. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words got caught in his throat. Mr. Daniels opened his eyes slowly. Ethan, don't look so scared. Ethan swallowed hard. I can't lose you, sir. Not now. Mr. Daniels managed a faint smile. You won't. Not really. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? I mean love doesn't leave when we do, Mr. Daniels whispered. It stays in the things we build, in the people we've touched. That's the only kind of forever there is. Ethan's eyes burned. You can't talk like that. You're gonna be fine. Mr. Daniels smiled again, but this time it reached his eyes. I hope so. But if I'm not, promise me something. Ethan leaned forward, gripping his hand. Anything. Take care of Lucas. And don't stop believing that good people exist, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. Ethan's voice broke. I promise. The older man closed his eyes, a quiet peace settling over his face. Good. Then I can rest easy. For a few seconds, the world was silent except for the steady hum of the machines. He didn't die that night. But from that day on, Ethan could feel time moving differently. Slower, heavier, precious. For months he stayed close. He balanced work, school, and caregiving, helping Lucas with chores, bringing food, fixing things around the house. They laughed often, cried sometimes, but through it all, they stayed a family, bound not by blood but by choice. Until one warm June afternoon, when the world finally asked Ethan to be brave again. He was under a car at the dealership, tightening a bolt, when his phone rang. He recognized the number instantly. The hospital. His heart sank before he even answered. Mr. Daniels has been brought in, the nurse said. You should come quickly. Ethan drove faster than he ever had before. The road blurred through his tears. When he reached the hospital, Lucas was already there, shaking, tears running down his face. Ethan didn't need to ask. He knew. Mr. Daniels was gone. The next few days passed like a dream. A quiet, aching dream where everything looked the same but felt different. The sun still rose, people still talked, but nothing sounded right. The dealership was too quiet. The world felt smaller. The funeral was held on a cloudy afternoon, beneath the same wide Florida sky they used to sit under. The air smelled of salt and rain. Ethan stood beside Lucas and Grandma Rose, his hands trembling as the pastor spoke about kindness, legacy, and love. When it was time to speak, Ethan stepped forward. His voice shook, but he didn't care. Mr. Daniels wasn't just a good man, he said. He was proof that love can find you even when you think you've lost everything. I came into his life by accident, but he chose to keep me there like I was worth something. And because of him, I finally believed I was. He paused, looking at the crowd, at Lucas, at Grandma Rose, at the people from the dealership who had come to pay their respects. He taught me that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who stays. It's who shows up when everything else falls apart. And I'll carry his lessons with me for the rest of my life. His voice cracked. Thank you, sir, for choosing me. There wasn't a dry eye left when he stepped down. That night, back home, Ethan sat on the porch, staring at the stars. The air was warm and still. Lucas sat beside him, silent but steady. After a while, Lucas spoke. I keep expecting him to walk out with his coffee mug. Ethan smiled sadly. Me too. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Lucas said softly. He'd be proud of you, you know. Ethan turned to look at him. You think so? I know so, Lucas said. You kept your promise. Ethan nodded slowly. We both did. A tear rolled down Lucas's cheek. It hurts so much. I know, Ethan whispered. But he's not gone. He's just everywhere now. They sat there under the night sky, two souls bound by grief and gratitude, learning that love, real love, never truly ends, just changes form. Months later, life slowly began to move again. Ethan graduated from his program, earning a certificate in automotive engineering. He took over part of the dealership's management, working with Lucas to keep it running. They renamed it Daniels and Sons Auto, even though neither of them shared a last name. They said it was for the man who had made them both sons by heart. Grandma Rose watched proudly from the sidelines, often visiting the shop with pies and soft wisdom. The business grew, not because of fancy ads or big money, but because of how they treated people. Every customer who walked in felt seen, respected, cared for. And that, Ethan thought, was the best way to honor Mr. Daniels, by continuing his kindness. One evening after closing up, Ethan walked to the beach nearby. The waves rolled gently under a sky painted in gold and violet. He sat down on the sand, his shoes half buried, and watched the horizon. He thought about everything, the rainstorm that had started it all, the boy he used to be, the man he was becoming. He thought about the people who had believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. And then, quietly, he whispered, "Thank you." The wind carried his words out to the sea, and for a brief moment, he felt something, like a presence, a warmth. Not a sound, not a voice, but a knowing. As if the universe was whispering back, "You're welcome." He closed his eyes, letting the wind brush against his face. Sometimes he realized love doesn't show up as thunder or lightning. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's just the steady light that stays long after the sun has set, the kind that keeps guiding you even in the dark. And that's what Mr. Daniels had been to him. A light that stayed. Years later, when people would ask Ethan about his success, he never talked about business or money. He talked about people, about a boy in a wheelchair who refused to let him give up, about a grandmother who prayed over him every night, about a man who taught him that goodness isn't weakness. He'd smile softly and say, "I'm just a mechanic who got lucky enough to be loved right." And if you were to drive past that little shop in Clearwater, you'd still see the sign shining above the door, Daniels and Sons Auto, glowing softly in the evening light. Inside, laughter would echo, tools would clink, and the air would smell of oil and hope. And maybe, just maybe, if you listened closely, you'd hear the faintest whisper of rain, the kind that started it all, reminding you that sometimes the people who walk into your life unexpectedly are the very ones meant to change it forever. Because love doesn't always arrive dressed in perfection. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the form of second chances, in helping hands, in the courage to keep showing up. And if you hold on to it, nurture it, and let it heal you, that love becomes something unbreakable. It becomes the light that stays.